Hello. Thank you all very much for joining us. This is Megan Arlinghouse, Mediation Scheme Coordinators at TCM, and I'm joined here with David Little, Founder and Director of TCM. So you've joined us today for our webinar on how to increase mediation referral rates, and we have a number of great top tips for you that we'll share. And then we'll open up towards the end for some questions and answers. So I'll hand it over to David.
Megan, thank you very much, and welcome everybody to this webinar, one of our most popular webinars yet actually. So obviously there's a real interest in not just establishing mediation programs within organisations, but also helping, just being told our screen isn't showing it. Great, so our screen should be showing, sorry about that, I've forgotten to press the correct button. So hopefully you can see us and hear us also. So obviously a very popular event. I think mediation is becoming more widely used and much more credible within a growing number of organisations. But it always seems to be a challenge in a great number of organisations is about helping to make mediation credible in the eyes of the parties at the point where they experience conflict. And that's a real challenge for us in establishing mediation programs, is how do we ensure that when an individual or individuals experience conflict, that their first thought is mediation, and how do we overcome some of those blocks and barriers. So a little bit about the session. So a very, very warm welcome to TCM. It's the first time you've joined us for one of our webinars. I hope you find it useful. You should see there's a little dashboard in front of you. If you've got any questions at all, if there's anything that you'd like to check in, please do feel free to do so, and we'll try and answer your questions either throughout the session or certainly at the end. There'll be space for answering any questions towards the end of the seminar as well. So we've set up over 100 mediation schemes in organisations across the UK and increasingly overseas. So we'll be drawing on some of that experience and some of the data that we've collected from those schemes, and hopefully bring some of the best practice that we've developed to share with you today as part of this network, this webinar. We also run here at TCM a quarterly coordinators network meeting, and I know a number of people here on today's webinar do attend those network meetings. Those are available for anybody who's interested in setting up a mediation program, already has a mediation scheme in their organisation. And they're provided really to share best practice, to encourage networking, and just to help promote the idea of collaborative processes and mediation within organisations. And they're really well attended. So if you can come along to the next one, Megan will tell you a bit more shortly. And finally, also, we've collected data and information from the Apaxio system. I know a number of you are using this now, which is the online mediation case management system and dispute resolution software that we've developed here at TCM. And again, that's been very helpful for us in collecting data and information that we'll be sharing with you today. So the focus for today is very simple, really, the focus for today. Two main areas that we're concerned about is why don't people access mediation services? When, you know, I go out to talk at conferences and workshops, and everyone agrees mediation is the right answer. As you know, so many people say, it's everyone wins and no one loses. So why is it at the point of conflict that we see such high levels of resistance? I'd like to try and understand that at a macro level, i.e. at an organisational level, and at a micro level for individuals. And as Megan said as well, we'll be sharing with you some handy hints and tips and ideas that will help you to promote mediation more widely and see an uplift in mediation referral rates. For those of you who are interested in developing a mediation program and haven't made that first step yet, I hope that some of these hints and tips will be helpful for you in terms of how you design your mediation programs. You can design success into the way that your mediation program operates. It's always useful to start a session on mediation and trying to understand exactly what we mean by the term. I know a number of you will be aware of what mediation is, but for those of you who aren't so sure or would like me to recap it, I'm just going to spend a moment doing that now. So just here are some of the key points. So what is mediation? Well, it's a safe process. I mean, we know that people, when they experience conflicts and disputes, the root cause of those conflicts, so a sense of needs not being met, not able to express their values or beliefs in a way that they believe to be reasonable. That gives rise to a sense of loss. It could be a real loss, a substantive loss, a perceived loss, or it could be a loss, an anticipation of a future loss. So there are three forms of loss which we know drive the conflict, an actual loss, a perceived loss, or an anticipated future loss. That causes us to feel unsafe, and when we don't feel safe, we feel fearful, and often in those environments we become quite guarded or defensive, and we start to see that fight or flight, I'm right, you're wrong approach. So the first thing the mediator does is create a safe space for the parties to have a non-adversarial dialogue with each other. So mediation is inherently non-adversarial. It's a process. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's not as formal and structured as perhaps your existing HR procedures, but it still operates as, it's still a process. It has a framework, and I think that can be very powerful, and people tell me that they find the framework very useful. The mediator is an impartial third party, but we already know that might be a manager, a leader, an HR professional, or someone outside the organisation. So many people take on the role of mediator so long as they don't have a direct interest in the conflict or a stake in the outcome of the conflict. And the mediator simply helps the parties to have an open and honest dialogue. I was talking at 3 conferences last week, and I was being asked very similar questions, and one of the questions that people were asking me is, what is the essence, David, of mediation? What makes mediation so different? And it's simple for me. It's honesty. When we can give people the chance to speak honestly, not being guarded or defensive, and sharing their insights, their hindsights, their learning and their understanding, that unlocks the potential in the relationship. So the mediator creates an environment for people to be open and honest, and in doing so, helps them to identify outcomes which are acceptable to both of them and which are collaborative in nature. That can be at one end of the spectrum, agreeing to disagree, but in a way which is more professional perhaps, where the relationship isn't impacted by the conflict, or at the other end of the spectrum could be a complete rethinking about how 2 or more parties work together in an office environment. The nice thing about mediation is we don't have to propose solutions. In fact, our belief is that the best people to solve a conflict are the parties directly involved. We're not there to make past behaviours and to develop a set of new behaviours which are going to benefit them in the future. So we don't try and assess culpability, we don't wag fingers, we don't tut. And of course there are a number of key messages here around mediation. I've mentioned it's safe, it's confidential. Parties will not be open and honest if they believe that that information will be used against them in some way at some future process, whatever that process might be. So it remains confidential, and as you all know, all of the notes from a mediation process are destroyed. And when we're setting up an in-house mediation program, one of the first documents we'll develop is a confidentiality protocol to ensure that what's said in the mediation stays within the mediation process. The second point is well worth reminding ourselves, because there's a lot of pressure on this principle at the moment here in the UK and I know elsewhere. It's about mediation is a non-mandatory voluntary exercise. We treat people like adults. One of the biggest failings of dispute resolution in many organisations that I see is a paternalistic framework in which disputes are handled. We talk in mediation about creating adult-to-adult dialogue. Well, we need to start that from the very beginning. We can't force people to come into the room. But when we do see them come together of their own volition and their own desire to reach a resolution, however hesitant and nervous that may be, we see real potential delivered through mediation. So that's a simple definition of mediation, but I hope that's useful just in terms of giving us a shared understanding of what exactly we're talking about here today. And I also think, in some respects, thinking about our mediation referral rates, I've already thrown down some challenges that hopefully will give you a chance to think about why your employees and managers might be resistant to mediate. So Megan and I have been working for a number of years now about trying to understand what some of the barriers to people accessing mediation are, and before we share some hints and tips, I'd like to, if you like, define what we understand the problem to be with you. The first definition we're going to focus on today are the macro factors, the organisational factors that can be contributors to low take-up of mediation. So why don't people access mediation services? I think the first one we've identified is a failure to secure senior management buy-in. If mediation operates in something of a vacuum, or if it doesn't have senior management buy-in, it isn't perceived as being credible. And in the mediation schemes where they've secured a signature from a chairperson, from a chief operating officer, a chief executive officer, onto a leaflet or a forward in an intranet site, it might appear, I don't know, to be superficial, but I don't think it is superficial. I think it's about the leaders of the organisation sending out a clear message about their support for and buy-in to your mediation programme. It sets the tone for the mediation scheme. It also does something very, very important, and something I'm going to reference in more detail, but it aligns the values and the vision of the organisation with the operational functionality of a mediation programme. And without that alignment between vision, values, and the operational function of mediation, mediation can sometimes feel like it's drifting. Organisations who haven't necessarily explained clearly what mediation is are hindered by a lack of awareness amongst employees and managers. There might be an understanding for those people in the employment relations team or the HR team or even in a management function, but to others in the organisation it sounds jargony, it sounds very HR-led, it doesn't really make sense to them in their everyday lives. So when they experience conflict, as we all will at some point in our careers, there's a lack of awareness of the mediation process. Of course, it happens behind closed doors. So not only is there a lack of awareness, but there's a lot of mystery that surrounds mediation. It can be a hindrance to mediation. It could be a lack of understanding about the mediator's role. What is a mediator? Who is a mediator? What do we do? What don't we do? I'll often do presentations and people think the mediator might in some way arbitrate a solution, or the mediator may make solutions to the parties. And there are some very simple misconceptions that are easily overcome, but without having undertaken that exercise, people perceived it to be shrouded in mystery. There's a lack of engagement in a number of organisations who've told me they've struggled with mediation, their mediation programme. And when we look at that, we start to see that maybe some of the key players, the key stakeholders, aren't fully included. The unions in particular are a major stakeholder in any mediation programme, but so too are occupational health teams, line managers, the legal team within your organisation, your shareholders, your internal and your external environment. And actually building an awareness and involvement in mediation with these key players, as we'll see from a couple of slides along, you'll see that this can make a major difference. These people will act as champions to the scheme, but they will also ensure, well, let's put it this way. If you're trying to encourage 2 of your employees to go into mediation, and one of those employees is a member of a trade union, the union may not come out and say, look, we're not going to support mediation because they don't want to be seen to be blocking this. But all it takes is a, well, I'm not sure if mediation's right for you. And those words of disencouragement is all it takes for the employee to reject mediation. Now, you don't know these conversations are happening necessarily. All you see is a low take-up of mediation. But in actual fact, it's coming from a lack of engagement of key players. Some people believe that because mediation is so powerful and so effective that we have special dispensation as mediators for any form of governance framework or any project management discipline. And my experience is completely the opposite of that. Mediation doesn't have special dispensation to not be managed in the same way as any other project or discipline within the organisation. And by thinking about the governance framework and the structures within which mediation works, it will ensure that the correct resources are allocated, it has credibility, and it functions effectively. So one of the hints we will look at today is we'll be looking at how to develop a governance framework within your organisation to ensure mediation is an equal to any other project that will be in place. And the final 2, I think, are really important in terms of organisations. As we know, and as I've mapped many hundreds of grievance processes, so I'm talking from some experience when I say that the vast majority of grievance processes which offer procedural fairness, offer that procedural fairness on the basis that the best way to have procedural fairness is through an adversarial process. And if you've heard me speak before, you'll know that I'm very passionately arguing that procedural fairness can be applied through collaborative justice as well as through adversarial justice. So while mediation does work well outside of the formal process framework, it can work very well at the early stage of a conflict, nipping issues in the bud and supporting and promoting the line management function. I also believe passionately that mediation should be clearly stated within a grievance resolution environment, so that mediation is part of your organisation's duty of care, and it's part of how the organisation delivers procedural fairness. And the final point in terms of some of the organisational factors is conflict. Even in organisations who've embraced mediation, still see conflict as the necessary evil of the organisation. So in some respects, mediation is just another tool for mitigating the negative harm and impact of conflict. And as mediators, it might be going a little bit too far to say we celebrate conflict, but we certainly recognise that within conflict is enormous potential for growth, learning and change. So organisations who still see conflict as the necessary evil or the fallout when things are going wrong in the organisation, I think perhaps mediation falls into the trap of being seen as another tool for mitigating risk. And I had a party recently saying, well, why should I go into mediation? This is just sweeping the problem under the carpet. So if people perceive that mediation is a second-rate form of justice, and it doesn't feature in your formal justice processes, then they will not necessarily engage with it. And as soon as we hear the word, no, I won't engage with this process, then we start to experience some of the challenges. So those are some of the organisational factors. We'll now look at some of the individual personal factors. So leading on for some of the fear of lack of understanding, it gives us a certain sense of some fear of the unknown. Imagine that you're in a conflict with one of your co-workers or colleagues or a manager, and someone offers mediation, but you've never heard of it. It's not in your policies and procedures. You've maybe read it in one of your trade journals, but you don't really know about it. The first thing I would say is, look, I really think this mediation thing's fabulous. I love it. It's just not for me. I think mediation will be appropriate for another person. I don't want to be experimented on with one of your newfangled meditation programs. And that's a very powerful fear, because we already know the parties are feeling fearful and unsafe. And so mediation, by not having clear understanding, actually can exacerbate that fear of the unknown, and unwittingly can cause further polarisation. And that lack of understanding of the process and the mediators, again, causes a lot of questions and challenges for me. It leads me to lack trust or confidence in the mediation process. Now, most people aren't in conflict every day. I mean, some people would, for the conflict at work, to be the first time they've had conflict in their careers. It's not something that they experience all of the time. So their concern, therefore, is I'm concerned about the impact on my career. I don't know how this is going to work. I don't trust the process. It's too risky. I'll stick to the processes that I know, the tried and tested. They might not be great, but at least they've been in place for a number of years. I feel that I might be giving up my rights. I might be held to account. We know that mediation does hold people to account in a very powerful way. But unless that's explained to individuals and it's seen as a constructive mechanism, that being held to account could feel like it's going to be confrontational, potentially violent and aggressive, certainly something which could be damaging to their well-being and maybe their reputation. I've heard mediation described as a punishment. I've done nothing wrong. Why should I go and sit with this other person? I'm right. To be honest with you, I deserve justice. They should be fired for their behaviour. And these are powerful statements that individuals perceive because of the position that they've adopted is that they are right and the other person's wrong. And of course in mediation schemes these are very real. And those of you who are mediation scheme coordinators, I'm sure you've heard some or other of these statements being raised before. So if you feel like the mediation scheme coordinator tearing out your hair, you'll perhaps recognise some of the impact that this is having for your mediation scheme. Well, firstly, we see a low volume of mediation referrals. It should be working. We should see an increase in mediation referrals, but the mediators are sat waiting for that first mediation referral to come through, or it feels like there's been a major dip. They become frustrated, maybe begin to lack confidence in your mediation program. How can we do this? What can we do to generate referrals? And as a result, the mediators may feel that their skills go stale, and we know that here at TCM, where this has happened, we'll maybe run some workshops for the mediators, some role plays, some case studies. But those mediators really are itching to get some experience after their training, and are concerned about not having the skills when they're called upon. To the outside world, the perception can then be that, or to other stakeholders, that the mediation scheme isn't effective, functioning effectively, and it's not delivering value. Where's the bang for the buck? This mediation scheme that was supposed to deliver so much hasn't had as many mediation referrals as we'd have expected. And of course, the real benefit to the organisation is that the disputes that you're experiencing, they're not being resolved satisfactorily, so you're not actually realising the benefits of mediation that you first came to aspire to when you were deriving your vision. And as a result, the organisational culture isn't being changed. And this can build in a level of inertia into the organisation, or a sense of some frustration that begins to creep into the process. And this, unless there's a mediation scheme coordinator or someone who is managing the mediation programme can pick this up and try and resolve some of these issues, these can actually be a final death knell for many mediation programmes. Thankfully here at TCM, with Megan and myself and others, we're often called by mediation programmes that have been set up, not by TCM, I hasten to add, where a number of these problems have occurred, and people come and say, help, what can I do to re-enliven our scheme? So I hope that has set the context and talked a little bit about some of the challenges and some of the issues that mediation schemes experience. You may have some of your own. Please do feel free to share them. We'd love to hear from you about any challenges that you're having. But what I'd like to do now is move into an environment where we're going to talk through some suggested outcomes, and also Megan's going to talk through a piece of work that she's been doing with a UK university to help them to develop their mediation program. So we'll share with you a case study today as well as part of the discussion. And as I've said, if there's any questions at all, please do feel free to ask them on the dashboard that you should have in front of you. In fact, Janine, I can see you've asked the question, are we able to have a copy of the slides, please? Yes, you are, Janine. And the slides and also the transcript from the recording will go online. And we've also been requested to write up a copy of the webinar, and this will be posted on mediate.com as well as our own website. So there will be an article published as a result of this webinar as well. So the first suggestion for setting up a mediation program is to set up a high-quality mediation scheme. To set up a mediation scheme that you can be proud of and that you know will be sustainable and effective over the long term. So building up a clear business case with targets and key performance indicators. What exactly are you trying to achieve? How will you measure success? How will you know if you've achieved success? What could knock you off course? What are some of the blocks and barriers? Who needs to be involved? And again, for those of you who've set up a business plan for your business case, for your mediation program, you should hopefully be seeing some of the benefit of that, because at the heart of that also you'd have seen that there's key stakeholder engagement. Whatever you do, get your board talking about this. It can be hard work getting to a board in the current economic situation, because of course your boards are making some really tough decisions right now, hopefully about growth, but maybe about correcting the size of your organisation. But it's worth persevering to get some time, even if it's a 5-minute presentation into your board to let them know what you're doing. And when you're there, try and get back at least twice a year so you can present back some of the findings. This is a good news story for your organisation. Your boards will enjoy listening to it. If it's a story of doom and gloom at the moment, or it's a story of optimistic growth in your organisation, this is going to work well, and it's worth securing that time in with your boards. And there'll be a non-exec director potentially who's nodding furiously whilst you're speaking in your presentation. Make a beeline for them after your presentation and see if they can become your board champion. Creating a scheme owner or a steering group within your organisation is something we've been doing for the last couple of years here at TCM. And basically this is a multidisciplinary group who meet maybe once a quarter, perhaps once every 6 months. They include key players in your organisation: unions, HR, line management, senior managers, employee groups, diversity or equality representatives. And they will, in essence, analyse any trends within your mediation programme, identify any resources, and act as a quality assurance basis. They will also become the champions of your mediation programme. That will also ensure that your mediation programme isn't just seen as a function of HR. And whilst HR are so fantastic and playing such an important role in driving change towards mediation, we also know that people's perception of HR can be sometimes negative or perceive that HR will take the management view. This helps to mitigate that perception, whilst HR then can go and actually work on the root cause of that perception by introducing mediation. Be clear about who operates the scheme, so it tends to be HR who operate the scheme, and we'll talk more about that, and make mediation a key part of your grievance resolution procedures, so it's clear and it's evidence-based. One of the hints that I often have, and it's visual, it's powerful, is go back to your grievance procedures or your bullying, harassment, or other dispute resolution procedures, and with a red pen, mark all of the parts of your procedure which are adversarial, about judgment or blame, punitive outcomes. They encourage combative or confrontational conversations. It's divisive, win-lose. They reach a sanction as a result of some form of determination, and they promote argument. Then with a green pen, go back to that very same procedure and just mark off each of the times that you see these words. Resolve, talk, listen, empathy, dialogue, non-adversarial, collaborative, consensus, mediate, win-win. And for those of you who have more than a line or two of green pen, send that through to me and I'll post it on my website as a model of best practice. So again, at an organisational level, I'm a great believer in the red pen, by the way. I absolutely believe that organisations should be clear about what is and will not be accepted in terms of disciplinary best practice in their organisations. But an over-reliance on the red pen creates an adversarial culture in which disputes are handled. So by promoting an equal amount of green pen develops a collaborative mechanism where collaborative processes have an equal status as adversarial processes, whilst both of those are delivering procedural fairness. And this is really important to stress this. We're not trying to diminish procedural fairness, we're trying to promote it and underpin it. So an equal balance of green and red is what we're striving towards here at stage one. I'm going to hand over to Megan now, who's going to talk through a very exciting piece of work that we've been working on with the University of Kent. And I understand that the University of Kent's mediation scheme coordinator is on the webinar today. So welcome, Julie, to you.
All right. Hello. So we just have a little brief case study here based on the University of Kent, their internal mediation scheme. They're a fantastic example of best practice in engagement and communication. They're actually a very recently established scheme, just got went live in, I think, June or July of this year. But of course, before that, it takes many months of setup and hard work to get the mediation scheme going before it actually goes live. So what we have with the University of Kent is they started off with a mediation focus group and impact assessment. And what this did was this engaged those key stakeholders that David was talking about in learning about mediation, understanding mediation, and really getting involved and supporting the scheme, which is critical to its success. Then, of course, the mediators were trained on TCM's National Certificate in Workplace Mediation, which is an accredited 6-day mediation training course. And then what we always hold up the university as a fantastic example for their mediation communications through their website. The university has a fantastic website where not only people can find out about mediation, they can refer a case through their page, and the mediators themselves have their own section as well. So it's an all-encompassing, all-informative website that's easy to use, easily navigable, and it's just a wonderful case, a wonderful example to ideally even base your own if possible. Another and simple just fact about their website is that it has a great simple domain, and what it is it's just mediation added on to their university's website domain. And what that means is that people who from the university can easily access it, easily find it. It's not hidden 6 pages deep within the website. It's just a nice, simple, and easily accessible site. And based on, through the success, even though it's just a brand new scheme, they're even starting to expand the service to students, because there's been already a great demand for the service, and it's just a clear and easy and obvious transition to offer this to not just employees but students as well. And based on all of that, we were happy that the university won the PMA's Newcomer to Mediation Award back in September for all of their hard work on engagement and communication. So well done to the university. And I will hand it back to David now.
Thanks, Megan, and hi again to everyone from University of Kent on this webinar. But a fantastic example of an organisation embracing mediation and building success in from the outset, strong coordination, good stakeholder engagement, celebrating the mediation programme, and doing it in an organised and timely manner so that when the scheme went live, they were ready for the mediation cases to start coming through. And of course, we're looking forward to continuing working with that organisation, as with many others, to promote mediation more widely, not just on employee mediation disputes, but as a part of a campus mediation programme, similar to many others that we've set up here in the UK. So the second suggestion, building on the case study that Megan's just talked us through, is building awareness and raising awareness of your mediation programme. Again, this is always going to be context specific. There'll be some things that will work in your organisation and some that don't. So, for instance, some organisations have used posters and they've worked really well, but in other organisations, posters are just walked past and ignored. Some organisations have used payslip drops to raise awareness. That worked really well. In others, there seems to be something constantly falling out of payslips, and they don't get read. So it has to be very much centred around what your organisation is doing and how it's working. So the first thing to consider is developing a website and intranet site within your organisation. That can be a really powerful way of sharing information, and there are 4 things that will be worth including on your website or intranet site or any kind of communication. The first one is a clear definition of mediation using non-jargon language. The second one is clarification about the role of the mediator and who the mediators are. Again, making it accessible and making it easy to understand. The third one is to make it clear what the benefits of mediation are for the organisation and also for the individuals in a dispute. And the fourth area to consider as part of your communications is a case study or some sort of a story that explains how and where mediation works. The next consideration is, what do you call your scheme? And this is quite interesting. Is it just called XYZ Organisations Mediation Scheme? So Lloyds Banking Group, who are an organisation that established their scheme, just very simply, we sat in a brainstorming meeting with them, and one of their mediators came up with a really lovely name, Mediate First. I know I've seen that elsewhere, but do you want to call your scheme something, or do you just want to be called this XYZ Organisations Scheme? I would suggest giving it a name. It gives you something that you can be proud of, and it gives you something with brand, and of course brand has brand values that could be worth thinking about. Think about how you embed it into your culture, we'll talk more about shortly. People often say to me, should we just do a soft launch, a kind of rolling launch, or a hard launch? I'm really clear from the 12 years of experience of setting up schemes, hard launch is always better. So if you train up some mediators, bringing them online, having a certificate session, photographs with your Chief Executive Officer, information in your internal newsletter is far more effective than just rolling it out on a sort of try-as-you-see approach. I do understand try-as-you-see, but it never works as well as a hard launch. Regular workshops and seminars, continue building it into your posters, into your internal communications, whatever works in your organisation, but keep talking about it. What we want people to do is to think about mediation at the point of conflict, which means that you constantly need to make the mediation message accessible to everybody. We've launched a programme through the PMA here, the Professional Mediators Association in TCM, promoting mediation and developing what a programme called Mediation Champions. More information is on the TCM website, but this is something that people can sign up to become mediation champions and to promote it more widely. So the third suggestion, building on the previous 2 suggestions of setting up a mediation scheme and promoting it and raising awareness, is engaging key stakeholders. Mediation is more than an HR-led initiative in your organisation, so I think it's worth thinking about who should be involved and the role that those different players will play in your organisation's scheme. So think about your unions, your staff side representatives, learning and development teams within your organisations, because obviously there's going to be some training and development areas here in developing your mediation programme. The legal team, legal department, particularly if you're thinking about using mediation at a later stage or at pre-litigation. Leaders, senior managers, line managers, and of course your HR colleagues across the HR function. And it's worth doing that. It's worth spending time getting all of these people together to talk about mediation and their perspective on conflict and conflict resolution and buying into mediation. So here are some ideas on how to do this. I think the first one, and this is something I spend a lot of time when I'm working with an organisation for the first time to do, is what are your organisation's values and vision, and how do they contribute to or link up with what you're trying to do in mediation? And that's a conversation that needs to be had at a senior level within the organisation and across the piece. Collect and share evidence within your organisation. We've developed a whole range of tools to help collect data in relation to conflict and the handling of conflict, the cost and the impact of conflict, employees' attitudes to conflict, and also managers' experiences of conflict and conflict resolution. That evidence can be useful to collect baseline measures and also to share across the organisation the real cost and impact of conflict. Focus groups and impact assessments, they don't have to be onerous, but just getting key players in a room and listening to them. As mediators, our job is to listen to people and to help them express the narrative of the conflict. We use exactly the same principles in focus groups as helping people express their narrative, their story, to be authentic and honest about the experiences that they've had of conflict and also their experiences or attitudes of mediation. And you'll be amazed at how supportive people are of mediation if people are willing to listen to them. Collect and share case studies, testimonials, video. There's so much that can be done now with social media and the use of new technologies to promote mediation more widely. And present it to your union, your senior managers and other meetings. See if you can get a slot at your next annual general meeting. Could you be talking about mediation in your company's annual report? Look for anywhere to be able to get the word mediation mentioned within your organisation, but do it in tying in with your unions. Does the union have key stakeholders? So does the union have its own newsletter? Could you put something in there, for instance? These are all things that we've done in the past. In themselves, they may not make a lot of difference, but collectively, when they're done as part of a strategy on employee engagement, they make a major difference. And here's some evidence that we collected recently in terms of attitudes to mediation from amongst managers, and this was really helpful in some communications we did within one organisation. So managers feel more confident in dealing with work. 100% of managers who've been trained in mediation feel more confident. Some recent research done by the Centre for Dispute Resolution suggested that a third of managers would prefer to jump out of a plane for the first time than deal with a problem at work. Yet 100% of managers who've been trained in mediation skills feel more confident. A significant difference. 98% of managers believe that training has helped to build improved working relationships in their team. That's going to have a major impact on productivity and the overall effectiveness of their teams. And 95% of managers believe that mediation skills have had a positive impact on employee engagement. At a time where organisations are investing heavily in employee engagement, mediation is a major contributor to building an engaged, healthy, resilient workforce within those organisations. These are statistics that are worth collecting and worth sharing. So suggestion 4 is so thinking now on a micro level, how to get the parties to yes in a particular dispute situation. Well, you'd have guessed already, a large part of that is about building awareness. But awareness at the point where the party has a conflict, not a general awareness of mediation, but if two of your employees find themselves in a conflict and one party believes that they're right and the other person is wrong, is how do you ensure that at that exact moment in time they are being given access to information? But of course leaders have an important part to play. Good quality documentation, good quality websites, frequently asked questions for them to go and access. How and where do I get my information from? You need to be able to understand. So an exercise I would often go through is put your employee at the centre of the circle and map out all of the decisions that that employee makes about where and how to access information. And from your map, you can then ensure that mediation is included at each of those different points on the map. So we need to ensure that your unions, occupational health, other advisors, HR teams are providing good quality information. Ensure that you have a really strong intake or triage case. I do find sometimes that HR professionals will speak to an employee in a dispute and say, would you like to go to mediation? And the employee says, as many would do, no, thank you very much. That's not going to help you to build cases. So by having a strong triage or intake process, and again we can help you to develop that assessment process up, we'll ensure that HR professionals are introducing mediation correctly, asking the right questions, and at all costs avoiding an employee saying no to mediation. The most important thing is to try and secure a commitment from the employee not to mediate, but to have a conversation with a mediator on the phone. That's what we're trying to achieve here as an outcome, is would you be willing to speak to a mediator on the phone? The best people to secure a commitment to mediation, therefore, are the mediators. So whatever triage process we develop, it avoids the parties saying no, because when they do, it can be difficult to overcome. So build a triage process and an intake process that will help them to speak to a mediator rather than saying no to mediation at the point of conflict. And success breeds success. Again, sharing stories with individuals, helping them to understand the benefits of mediation, and providing conflict coaching as a precursor to mediation for people who are resistant or nervous about mediating is some one-to-one work with those individuals to help them understand their reactions to conflict, how they feel, what they need, what they'd like as objectives, to help reframe the conflict can be powerful precursor. An increasing number of organisations that we've set up mediation programs are now embedding a principle of conflict coaching to support their mediation work. We're also running a conflict coaching event here in December at TCM. More information on our website, but we're actually relaunching our conflict coaching activities, and I'm sure some of you who are here on this webinar will be coming along to that. If not, you're very welcome to join us. It's a free event. As it's so close to Christmas as well, we'll be having some mince pies and bubbly, and we'll get the date out to you as well. So finally, the final few thoughts before we come to the end of the webinar, and the final suggestion here is to look at the role of your managers. It's a truism. Leaders and managers are the best mediators that your organisation has. There are questions, there are already questions that are coming in from people on the webinar about the role that that leaders can play. How can we ensure they're impartial? This is a session I run regularly at TCM, is ensuring that it's promoting mediation skills amongst leaders and managers. But leaders and managers can be really effective at nipping issues in the bud and bringing the parties together. So building an awareness for managers on how to do that, but also an awareness on how managers can access mediation, because if they aren't the right person to mediate, they can certainly signpost employees to the mediation scheme if they know where it is. Think about building up a video or blended learning environment. We're working with one university at the moment to develop a blended learning video e-learning package for their managers. The cost of video and blended learning is so much lower now than it was even 12 months ago. So there can be some really positive tools that managers can look at on their iPhones and in their own time to help them understand mediation. So there are different ways of getting the message out there. Running internal webinars. Some of the big organisations we work with run regular webinars for their leaders and managers. Also, working with your learning and development leads is scanning and mapping your existing L&D framework, your learning and development framework. And rather than having to create loads of new courses, is look at places where you can develop empathy skills, mediation skills, reframing skills into your existing learning and development framework. So these skills that we use as mediators are cascaded and run throughout your entire learning and development program. And most L&D leads are absolutely delighted to work with mediators and mediation scheme coordinators to look at how to build some of these skills into existing L&D frameworks. And we run here at TCM one-day training programs for managers. It doesn't take weeks or months to train a manager in core mediation skills. It can happen in a day. And in that day, it can make a significant change to the way that managers handle disputes and conflicts. And this is what you should see as some of the benefits. I'll talk about some of these in more detail in a moment. Increased visibility of mediation in your organisation, increased trust within your scheme, increased engagement of key players, increased mediation referral rates for your mediation programme, and overall an increased awareness of mediation across the piece. The objective here, when we set up a mediation programme, is within 3 years of establishing a mediation programme, employees are coming to HR or managers asking for mediation by name. That might sound like a dream, that your employees would ask for mediation, but that's what we're aspiring to, is that people will see mediation not as an alternative form of dispute resolution, but as a credible form of dispute resolution and equal to other approaches in your organisation. You should ultimately see the increased return on investment, and here's some examples of what you should say. For those of you who've got mediation schemes running, you'll know that mediation delivers this and much, much more. And each of these can be measured and costed and codified within your organisation, so you can help to assess the true value. And what I say to organisations is don't try and choose all of these. Choose the 2 or 3 that are most connected or resonant with your HR strategy or your organisational values. So if your organisation is concerned about employee well-being or stress management or absence reduction or reducing the number of employment tribunal claims you're defending, choose those as your key measures and then develop a data collection system. And again, we have these to help you truly measure the return on mediation for your organisation. So what happens next? Well, we run many webinars, and they're all free of charge. At the moment, we have a policy, if it moves, we run a webinar on it. So we have webinars from introductory sessions on mediation, how to set up a mediation scheme, right the way through to more advanced use of mediation in the psychological contract, promoting employee engagement, and so on and so forth. They're free of charge. You're very welcome to join as many of those as you wish. The introductory sessions are great for naysayers, cynics, and doubters. So if you've got any of those in your organisation, I run a regular quarterly raising awareness of mediation for anybody who thinks it's not right. Our coordinators workshop and LinkedIn group is available for everyone. Again, we are going to be introducing a small fee in 2013 for our coordinators workshops just to cover the costs. I think it's £50, Megan, that will be running the sessions at, give or take. We've been doing them free of charge, but unfortunately we will have to start charging for those just to cover our costs. But of course, LinkedIn, we love LinkedIn at TCM. It's free of charge, and we have a LinkedIn group for mediation scheme coordinators for sharing questions and news. On-site meeting, if you've got a mediation scheme and you're thinking, well, some of the things I've been saying here resonate, if you'd like us to come on site and just do a scheme review with you, whether you've used TCM to set up your scheme or not a problem. We'd be very happy to come out with you. And we don't charge for those. That's something we're very happy to do, just to come out and see how things are going. All you need to do is check in with Megan or myself. For those of you who've got a scheme but you've got a lot of Excel spreadsheets in your mediation scheme at the moment, lots of Word documents dotted around, Apaxio could be the solution to your, the answer to your prayers. Again, if you're interested in a case management system that pulls everything together and gives some structure and organisation, all you need to do is ask, and we will provide you with that information with no problems at all. And finally, MEO stands for Mediation Eye Opener. I run these at least twice a month here in London and across the UK, and these are a chance to come in for half a day, again free of charge, although we will be introducing a small charge for these in 2013 of £50 per event. But it's a chance to hear me talk in more detail about some of the things I've covered in the webinar. So thank you very much for joining today's webinar. There's my email address, and Megan Arlinghouse, if you don't know, it's megan.arlinghouse, ARLINGHAUS, at the TCM Group. But we'll send out all of our details. You'll get our email address after this. If you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, then be delighted to do so. I do love LinkedIn and getting more active on there every day. And we do just, if you're able to stay with us for a little bit longer, there are just a few questions which I'd like to just run through just very quickly. So first one, I'll be able to have a copy of the slides. Yes, Janine, as I've mentioned, that's absolutely fine. So another question, Martha, thank you for this, Martha. So could a mediator be within the HR team, or do they need to be independent? Well, Martha, the easy answer to that is both. HR can and do take on a role of a mediator, although HR tend to be more of a signposting function, but they can mediate. But there's no need to have mediation simply as someone outside the organisation. People within the business can be impartial. They already are being impartial. A line manager already takes responsibility for a lot of HR functions, hiring and firing and coaching and supporting and developing and growing and performance managing the team. Dispute resolution is no different to any of the other management functions, we support leaders to take on their roles. And many of my sessions, Martha, focus in more detail about the role that HR play. But hopefully, as you've seen from this session, HR's role is often to act as the scheme coordinator, the people who run the mediation scheme. So everything that I've been talking about here today in the webinar is often undertaken by the HR function. HR professionals, so Pam, thank you for this question. HR professionals can often feel threatened by mediation and mediators if they perceive they are already doing this. How can you differentiate for them to ensure that they are an advocate? A great question, Pam. Thank you very much for that. I think they are already doing this. In fact, we're all doing this in some form or another, whether it's at the dining room table, a dispute over who has Cocoa Pops or shredded wheat, or a dispute with a neighbour. These skills are used by a great many people in a great many ways, and I celebrate the role that HR play, acting as a mediator, a facilitator, an enabler, and particularly for those organisations who've adopted the Ulrich model. What we're talking about here with mediation skills underpins the essence of Ulrich. And what I've found in many organisations is the reliance on adversarial processes actually has undermined or diminished the effectiveness of HR, and mediation unlocks the potential. So I like to see this being a real strong partnership with HR, and I celebrate the role that HR play in helping to promote dialogue, and the mediation skill is an additional element to that, Pam. Julie, thank you very much for your question. Could you define the role of a mediation champion? I can indeed. The mediation champion is a scheme that we've set up where people very simply sign up to say that they'll do whatever they can to support mediation, that they'll support their fellow mediators, and that they'll work to raise the profile of mediation to make it credible. So there are a number of statements, very simple statements, that we ask people to sign up to be a mediation champion. It's open to absolutely anybody, so anyone can sign up to be a mediation champion. We've got it on our website, on the PMA's website. We're launching the Mediation Champion Initiative properly in December, but it's open to all. And of course, internally, all you're asking for internal stakeholders is just to sign up to what you're doing and to talk positively about mediation wherever and whenever they can. So it's not too onerous, it's not too difficult, it's a lovely hat that people can wear in addition to their other hats. They are the champions of your mediation program. So I'm very excited about that as well. So thank you, slightly over time, but there's been a lot to cover. I've really enjoyed the webinar. I'm getting used to talking to a telephone rather than a room full of people. It's still slightly different. So thanks to those of you who've been able to stay on the line. Like I said, we'll be writing this up as well. So I'll hand over to Megan, who's going to close today's session.
So, thank you very much, David. And I just wanted to say a quick thank you to everyone again for joining us today. I will be in touch with you all myself. I will share with you the recording that we will have on our website. Also, if you need any information on Apaxio, as mentioned earlier, or on our next Coordinators Network, which I believe is on January 17th, 2013, I can also send you all the necessary information for that. And yes, thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed yourselves, and hope to see you again sometime soon.
Thanks, Mary. Just a reminder as well, I'm doing, as I said, we do a lot of webinars at TCM. I'm running another webinar on Wednesday, and it's a really important webinar for us actually at TCM. It's the role that mediations play in supporting the inclusion agenda and tackling discrimination and harassment in the workplace. That's going to be starting at 1 o'clock. It's another 45-minute webinar focusing on the issue of diversity, inclusion and equality and the role that mediation plays. So if you are able to join me for that, you'd be very, very welcome. And again, it's proving, I think, to be very, very popular. So thanks, Megan. Thanks, everybody. And look forward to continuing the dialogue. Bye-bye.